It's officially the best time of the year. It's International Book Prize season. Hi, my name's Evelyn, and to say that I love translated literature would be a bit of an understatement. With International Book Prize season right around the corner, I thought that I would make a little video taking you through the journey of the International Book Prize. I'm splitting this video into 3 parts essentially. So in the first part, I want to take you through the history of the International Book Prize and the inauguration of the International Book Prize as we know it today. In the second part of the video, I want to look at previous winners and previous long-listed languages and long-listed authors as a way to help inform my predictions. And then the third part of the video will be me actually talking you through my predictions. So it's become like a bit of like a fun trend to try and predict the International Book Prize long list on Bookstagram. Last year I took part and I predicted the 13 long-listed titles and I only got 2 right. So I don't have much hope that I will do much better this year, but it's still a lot of fun and I've been really inspired by loads of my friends online, specifically my friend Eden, who created a story graph challenge, basically put down all of the eligible titles from 2025 to 2026. I've been kind of reading along through those eligible titles in order to build my predictions sort of long list. Alongside Eden's reading challenge, I've also been able to have some of the best conversations and have a lot of fun sort of playing like guessing games with a lot of my mutuals on Bookstagram. So it's been a lot of fun seeing what my friends are reading and what they think are going to make it onto the long list next week. I think they're great and it's been a lot of fun getting to have these discussions with them. So without further ado, let's just dive right in. I have a lot to say and it's going to be really difficult to condense this video to a sort of very digestible format. Let's get started. So, what is the Booker Prize and how is it different from the International Booker Prize? The International Booker Prize began in 2005 as the Man Booker International Prize, a biennial prize for bodies of work that were written in English. In 2015, the Booker Prize expanded its rules to allow writers of any nationality to enter, so long as the works were written in English and published in the UK. The consequent restructuring of the International Booker Prize as we know it today took place in 2016, establishing a new model for recognizing global fiction that would go on to become the Booker Prize's sister prize and the world's leading prize for translated literature. Where the Booker surveys the internal landscape of Anglophone literature, the International Booker Prize broadens the terrain entirely, insisting that contemporary literature cannot be understood within linguistic borders. This year marks 10 years of the International Booker Prize as we know it today. I, for one, cannot wait to see what this year's lineup looks like. One of the prize's most significant legacies has been the visibility that it affords translators. In English language publishing, translators have been historically uncredited, with movements like Name the Translator advocating for placing translators' names on the front covers as opposed to inside the title page. The International Booker Prize, then, in awarding the winning author and translator equal prize and money, reframes translators and authors as creative partners rather than intermediaries. This shift has aided critical discourse around translation, with reviewers now commenting on translation choices, publishers foregrounding translators on covers, and readers discussing translators as distinctive literary voices. In this vein, the International Booker Prize has done more than just elevate individual translators. It has also altered how readers think about the act of translation itself. As I mentioned, this year marks 10 years in the International Booker Prize's current form, reflecting literary culture in which international reading is no longer optional, but an essential part of understanding contemporary writing and the global landscape which shapes our multicultural society. Last year, Banu Mushtaq's Heartlamp and Deepa Basti's translation took home the International Booker Prize. Heartlamp's historic win celebrates a literature that has transcended many barriers in order to gain recognition, becoming the first short story collection to ever win the International Booker Prize. It is also the first novel translated from Kannada to be recognized by the International Booker Prize, and Kannada is a Dravidian language spoken predominantly in the state of Karnataka. Thirdly, Deepa Basti became the first ever Indian translator to win the International Booker Prize, and if it hadn't won, I, and like other readers, would not have been exposed to Kannadian literature. So thanks to the International Booker Prize's prestige, I was able to read literature from another continent, another language, and another culture that I otherwise wouldn't have encountered. So that is one of the many reasons why I love the International Booker Prize, and it is by far one of my favorite prizes to follow. Every year, I'm guaranteed to learn something new, pick up a book that I otherwise would not have encountered if it hadn't been longlisted, expose myself to a new culture, language, or writer. Overall, it is my favorite award, and I can't wait. On to the second part of the video, I thought we could look at some data. Now, this might come as a surprise to everyone. It has definitely come as a surprise to me because I am not good at maths. But one thing about me is I really do love a pie chart. I just find it so satisfying, and it's a great way to envision loads of data, and it's really fun and all the different colors, so I really do enjoy it. In order to make my list of predictions, I sat down and I went through so much data to basically compile pie charts from the last decade of the International Booker Prize. I looked at previous winners, previous long-listed languages, previous shortlisted languages, to basically show like, okay, which is the most popular translated language, which is the least popular translated language? Have we had any sort of extinct languages or languages that are just very rare and not commonly published? So I put it all together onto this little pie chart. I don't think I'm going to have time to go through all of the data, so I will just go through the shortlisted languages and some of the previous winners. In 2016, Han Kang's The Vegetarian took home the International Booker Prize. This was the first year that the International Booker had really become a thing. The Vegetarian, written by Han Kang and translated by Deborah Smith, took home that year's prize. In 2017, the shortlisted languages were Spanish, French, Danish, Norwegian, and 2 titles translated from Hebrew. The International Booker Prize winner was A Horse Walks Into a Bar, written by David Grossman and translated from Hebrew by Jessica Cohen. In the end, the 2018 International Booker Prize winner was Olga Tokarczuk. This was for her novel Flights, which I have not read, but it was translated from Polish by Jennifer Croft. I have read Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, also written by Olga, and I thought that was absolutely fantastic. So Flights is one that I really do want to get to. In 2019, Jocka Alati took home the International Booker Prize for her novel Celestial Bodies. Jocka Alati is the first female Omani writer to be translated into English, and this was translated from Arabic by Marilyn Booth. Jocka Alati is also the first Arab woman to ever win the Booker Prize. I think one of my goals would be to read all of the International Booker Prize winners. I think I follow someone on Instagram. I believe their name is Bob the Bookerer, and I believe that Bob read all of the longlisted, shortlisted, and Booker Prize winners in one year. I think it was something crazy about like 300 books, but that is a challenge that I would love to take on for the International Booker Prize. Now, in 2022, we've got 1 Spanish, 1 Korean, 1 Polish, 1 Hindi, and 1 French shortlisted language. The winner of the International Booker Prize in 2022 was Gitanjali Sri for her novel Tomb of Sand. This is published by Tilted Axis Press, and it's the first book originally written in any Indian language to win the International Booker Prize. Now, in 2024, Kairos by Jenny Eppenbeck, translated by Michael Hoffman, won the International Booker Prize. And this was also my first time attending the International Booker Prize ceremony, so this novel is extra special to me. As we can see from the stats, the most longlisted languages are Spanish and French, which is super interesting. Now, one thing that I wish that there was more of is, I guess, a differentiation between Latin American Spanish and mainland Spanish, because obviously it's not the same, but still Spanish and French are some of the most dominating languages. Some of like the least featured languages include Catalan, Turkish, Hindi, Gikuyu, and other languages that are just not even on the pie chart because they're so small. On the panel this year, we've got the chair, Natasha Brown, whose novel Universality was actually just shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Working with Natasha, we've got Sophie Hughes, who is literally one of my favorite translators of all time. She is phenomenal, and yeah, she is incredible. I'm really, really keen to see what sort of books Sophie Hughes picks. The fun little tidbit is that Sophie Hughes is actually the most shortlisted translator for the International Booker Prize. Throughout the 10 years, she has been shortlisted, I believe, 4 times, which is the most any other translator has ever appeared. So the fact that she's on the judging panel this year is just all the more iconic. She was actually shortlisted last year for Vincenzo Latronico's Perfection, which is an incredible book. I really do recommend it. We've also got the mathematician and broadcaster Marcus de Soy, the editor and writer Troy Onyago, and the columnist Nilanjana S. Roy. I feel like the lighting's gonna look really weird now that it's like super sunny, but I'm here for it. I think it'd be interesting to see what sort of books pop up this year. We've got a mathematician, a translator, a novelist, an editor, a columnist, a writer. Like, we've got such creative people on the panel this year. So I, for one, I'm really excited to see what they come up with. So without further ado, let's go into my predictions. Okay, these are some of my predicted titles for this year's International Booker Prize. Not all 13 of them are listed. These are only the ones that I have physical copies of. In no particular order at all, these are some of the books that I think are going to be longlisted for the International Booker Prize 2026. Venice Requiem by Khalid Liamlahi, translated from French by Roz Schwartz. Last year, some of you may have read Small Boat, which was published by Hope Road Publishing, Small Axis Press, and it was a fictional retelling about the death of a refugee who drowned in the waters. Nobody came to help because they were on the sort of border between French and English waters, and sort of that account goes into the racism and to the xenophobia and to just the contempt that people have for refugees. It was definitely an uncomfortable read, but it was very, very important and a necessary read. Hope Road Publishing and Small Axis have done it again, and they've published Venice Requiem in a similar vein, but without, comparing tragedies. This is also a fictional retelling about the tragic death of a 22-year-old Gambian refugee in Italy. On the 22nd of January 2017, Pater drowned when he was in Venice and nobody came to his rescue. What Khalid does is he sort of takes us through this fictional reimagining where he is talking to Pater directly and he's asking him, well, what were you doing here? Why were you here? What were you seeking to do? And in a way, it's a really moving and really devastating account of, I guess, that exposes the racism, the xenophobia, the mistreatment of refugees, the misconceptions of refugees. And what he does is he brings humanity back into the narrative. Pater is just one of millions of refugees that die every year. And what Khalid does is he investigates that. He brings him back to life through unearthing his memories. He asks a lot of questions. And like I said, the narrative is written to Pater directly, but he also weaves in other refugee deaths that happened either before or after Pater died, and within the same sort of circumstances. And in a way, what he does is he just brings humanity back to the conversation. I guess, yeah, what he does is he just brings life back to these people, and he reminds us that they are people that are dying. They're not statistics, they're not just numbers. They are people with real lives and hopes and dreams. And what he does is he tries to reimagine why Pater was there and what Pater was trying to do, what his dreams were. And it's just absolutely an essential read. I do genuinely think everyone needs to read this, and I hope that, if this gets longlisted for the International Booker Prize, that what it does is it forces people to get this book in their hands, to read and to learn more about what it's like for refugees. So I think this is absolutely phenomenal. I am so glad that I read it. It was by no means an easy read, but it is absolutely an essential read, and it's one that everybody should and has to read. Something that I'm starting to realize is in my predictions list, there seems to be like a little theme going on, which is there's a lot of historical retellings, or a lot of, I guess, books that I've picked that sort of blend the genres of memoir or fact with fiction. I don't know why. I haven't done it consciously, but this is just one of many books that will come out on my list. And I don't know, maybe it's just a trend that is in publishing right now, but this is just a little observation that I've made, but everyone needs to read this. In that same vein, I've got What Remains by Bryce Lamela, translated from Galician by Jacob Rogers. This is a very, very interesting book. The reason why I've picked it is because, one, I have never read anything like it. Two, it's extremely experimental. And three, once I finished reading it, I couldn't stop thinking about it like long after. And I kept looking for people to have conversations about it with. And I kept looking for other people who had read it so we could chat about it, because so much in such like a small novel, like so much is unpacked. And I think it's absolutely a testament to Jacob Rogers' translation, but also Bryce Lamella's writing style. I think this is phenomenal. What remains is also what I was mentioning before, which is a blend of sort of memoir with fact. It's basically written from the perspective of a PhD student who is researching Galician history. In the 1950s, Francisco Franco, during his dictatorship, decided to displace a lot of Galician farmers. He set them up in this sort of brutal experiment where he was trying to industrialize farming. And the narrator, who is never named, is researching a lot of the lost archival materials about this 1950s experiment under dictatorship. And it's when he's going through his archives that then he finds this woman who disappeared. And nobody knows what happened, nobody knows if she died. He starts to become a bit obsessed about this woman who disappeared, and he just wants to know more about her and her history. How did she get away? Did she get away? Did she survive? A lot of this book is sort of drawing on archival material, but it's a lot of like poetic and lyrical observations about life and loss and family and relationships. And I just think it's really masterfully written. Again, I've never read anything like this. So it really did stay with me for quite a while. Alongside weaving bits of the PhD thesis narrative with archival history, and then also familial history and relationships, we also get a little bit about loss. Specifically, the main character's dad has a chronic illness that he will not recover from. So it's sort of him looking back on his life as well, and I guess making peace or grieving the fact that he will also lose his dad too. So there's a lot to unpack in this book. Like I said, it's one that I feel like everyone has to read. So both of these books have made it onto my predictions list just because they have both taught me a lot about human history, and specifically human history that we cannot document or that we cannot record. Common theme in my books for this year's predictions list, because I just feel like if a book stays with you for that long, then I do think it should be up for the International Booker Prize longlist. Another book that I have picked is Bloody Awful in Different Ways by Andrev Walden, translated from Swedish by Ian Giles. If you've watched my previous video, then you have already seen me read and review this. In October, I got to interview Andrev, and so this is a book that has also kind of stayed with me. I think that it is absolutely phenomenal. But for those of you who don't know what the book is about, the book is essentially about a young boy named Andrev who has 7 fathers in 7 years. Now, the story begins with Andrev discovering that his dad is not really his dad, and thus begins this spiral of the 7 fathers in 7 years. It's a coming of age novel, and it predominantly focuses on Andrev's upbringing and him, I guess, having to come to terms with the fact that masculinity and fatherhood can take many different forms. What I loved about this book is that it is so funny. It's written in a very like darkly dry humor, which I love. The book is a blend of autofiction with a bit of memoir and a bit of this sort of fourth wall breaking meta writing style. I think it's really, really cleverly written. It's funny. It's, I guess, sort of making light of a turbulent childhood, but without casting any judgment on his mother for having 7 partners in 7 years, or without having any judgment for the situation that he's in. He's just sort of like, the tone is very flippant and the tone is very like, oh, this is terrible, but then this happened. And so it's very funny, raw, real. It's also very like addictive. You're just reading, you're like, well, I want to know what happens next. Very, very, very eloquently translated by Ian Giles. While this one is also blending sort of memoir with autofiction and sort of fictional retellings like the other two have. While I don't think that this one is quite as politically charged, I do think that this is highly entertaining, beautifully written, and I do think that it would make for a good read. I still learn a lot, and I do think that it's highly entertaining, and I do think it's one that would do quite well. everyone that I've recommended it to has absolutely loved it as well, which is really nice because now I've got people to laugh about it with. So I do think that this is a strong contender for this year's Booker as well. Next up, my other prediction is She Who Remains by Renee Karabash, translated from Bulgarian by Isadora Angel. This is such a good book. I read this in like 2 days. It was practically one sitting, but I started reading it at night and I literally couldn't stop. This is a fantastic book and I do think it's one that everybody should read. It's set in a remote village in Albania. It follows Bajika, who, in order to escape an arranged marriage, declares herself as a sworn virgin, which, according to the Kanun laws, basically means that she renounces her sexuality and her gender as a woman in order to become a man. But there are consequences to this. So, in becoming a sworn virgin, it immediately creates a sort of blood feud, and it means that someone in her family must die. And within this book, we get a lot about sort of Albanian history, specifically the constraints of the Kanun laws. And it's written in this sort of stream of consciousness way where you're in the mind of Bajika, consequently known as Matija. It tells a story about her coming to terms with her life in this way, them coming to terms with their entire upbringing and the fact that they are actually a queer woman and they cannot explore that queerness nor sexuality from the constraints of the sort of village and the societal restraints. This is really interesting because I've never read a book translated from Bulgarian before. I've never read a book set in Albania either. So I thought that this was really interesting. I learned a lot about gender roles. I learned a lot about the treatment of women. And this book is also just really funny. It's a mix of humor and sort of satire about the laws and about how stupid they are. And I think the author really makes fun of that and really hones in on the hypocrisy that these overly religious people have and sort of the violence they infringe upon her just for being different. Because it's written in a stream of consciousness way, it's really captivating and you just sort of whiz through it. I think it's absolutely mesmerizing and it was so beautiful to read. There are a lot of poems and extracts mixed with letters from loved ones that are weaved into the narratives. I not only learned a lot, but I also love the way that this was written. It's extremely experimental, both in terms of content, but also format. I thought that this was mesmerizing. And the best part is that we do have some queer joy. And I always love a book with queer joy and a happy ending for queer people. It's, yeah, very much like a coming of age narrative, coming to terms with one's sexuality, identity, one's sense of self, despite societal constraints. I think that despite its very specific sort of cultural setting, it is a very universal story, and I think it's one that everyone should read. Next up, we've got The Duke by Matteo Melchiorre, translated from Italian by Antonella Lettieri. This is a mammoth of a book, as you can see. It is huge, but it is so eloquently written and translated. This is an absolute epic, but it's one that is so incredibly rewarding, and the story is so beautiful and universal and just really, I guess, addictive. I had the pleasure of talking to Antonella about her translation process on my podcast, and that just made me love the book so much more. If you haven't listened to that yet, I highly recommend that you do. I personally love to hear from translators and I love to learn more about their process, so I really do recommend that you listen to that if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the Duke and what it was like to translate this behemoth. Basically, the Duke follows the Duke, who lives in this sort of manor in this remote village in near the Dolomites. And essentially, it's a tale as old as time. It's one where men fight over land, and men fight over wood, and men fight over family. But it is so much more than that at the same time. It's phenomenal how the novel begins with the Duke sort of coming to terms with the fact that he does not have a family of his own, but he spends a lot of time looking through archival materials. And it is there that he starts discovering the legacies of his family. And that, in many ways, while it keeps him company, it also does him a lot of harm, because all of a sudden the Duke starts thinking, well, well, what would my ancestors do? Would my ancestors stand for this? Should I fight for my land? Should I fight for my ownership, or should I just let it go? And so we get this like very, I guess, archaic way of thinking of, men fighting over land and men fighting over rights and what is right and virtue and all of these like themes that have been throughout history. But what I love most about this is that at its core, it's a very human novel. The Duke is a very complex character who speaks in a very funny way, I might add. He's trying to speak in this very highbrow way. So he's using a lot of archaic and antiquated language that we don't really use anymore. But this story is set in the modern day. It's a very human and a very universal novel. There are themes of belonging, there are themes of family, of wanting to be understood. I think the characters are absolutely eclectic and really funny and really weird. I love Italian literature and I love the whole family saga drama narrative, and this is very much that. So I really enjoyed it and it is beautifully translated. So I think that this is a really strong contender. Next up is On the Calculation of Volume 3 by Solveig Ball, translated by Sophia Hersey-Smith and Jennifer Russell. If you know me or if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I am the biggest fan of the On the Calculation of Volume series. I've been reading them since Volume 1. I just finished reading Volume 4, which is not released yet. It's safe to say that I am in it for the long run. The reason why I even got started is because the first one was longlisted and shortlisted for the International Booker Prize last year. So last year I had the privilege of interviewing Barbara Haviland, who translated the first and the second volumes. Fortunately for us, but great for Barbara, Barbara has now retired. So she handed over the honor of translating the rest of Solveig's series to Jennifer Russell and Sophia Hersey-Smith. I do actually want to do a whole breakdown, a whole video just on this book series alone, basically telling you why you should read it and what is so great about all of them. But to keep it short for this video, to summarize, On the Calculation of Volume basically follows Tara Selter, who is stuck reliving the same day over and over and over. So Tara Selter has been stuck in November 18th for a long time, and basically Volume 1 explores the concept of her being stuck and what she tries to do to get out, and I guess her just coming to terms with the fact that she's stuck reliving the same day over and over and over. Volume 2 follows Tara as she sort of tries to find seasons. She believes that the only way she can get out of November 18th is if she sort of creates a whole year by herself. So she starts traveling to try and find different seasons. She looks for a way out of November 18th. Volume 3, without giving too much away, is following her trying to escape, except that she's no longer alone. That is all I'm going to say. I loved volumes 1 and 2, and I will say that volume 3 captures exactly the same voice of Tara Selter, except that in this book she's a little bit angrier. She's more frustrated. She's been stuck in November 18th for quite a while, and I feel like the change in her tone and the change of the translators just works really well together. I think that they did an excellent job with this, and I just think that this is genuinely one of my favorite series of all time. So I would really love to see this on the long list. And also, I do think that because it is now 2 separate translators, it's not the same translator for volume 1, I do think that there is a really high chance that they are going to get longlisted, just because it is absolutely excellent. If you love language, if you are someone that, wants or needs to focus more on the, I guess, little moments and details of everyday life that we so often overlook, then this is a series for you. If you're someone that is very observant and very contemplative and someone who's just spends a lot of time in their head, then I do think that this is a series for you. I absolutely love it. I love the language, I love the way it's written, and I can't wait to see where the rest of the series goes. I should say though, that if you are about to start, bear in mind that this is a septology. So we've actually got 4 more books to go. I've already read volume 4, which is coming out in April, and I need more people to read it, so I have more people to talk about it with. But yes, I would absolutely love to see volume 3 on the long list. And a fun little fact is that I'm actually on the inside of the proof for volume 3. Like I said, this is one of my favorite series, so the fact that I got to have a little role or have a little part in being inside the cover of the proof just means a lot to me. Next up in my predictions is You Glow in the Dark by Liliana Colanzi, translated from Bolivian Spanish by Chris Andrews. I actually read this last year as part of my Women in Translation Month reading challenge. It was my first time reading Bolivian literature, and I absolutely love this. So this is a short story collection where the stories kind of like end up intertwining and going into one another. I absolutely love when writers do this, and so I really enjoyed that this was an aspect of this. It's got this ecological disaster as sort of the center point in the narrative. It says, in 1987, an unsecured source of radiotherapy was stolen from an abandoned hospital in Guyana, Brazil, resulting in 4 deaths and 249 contaminations. Liliana Colanzi's debut collection is inspired by this radiological disaster, which each story seizes the reader's attention through her unpredictable and original storytelling. It's really, really original. Not only is it blending these sort of like genres and also these themes of ecological disasters, but it's also just really experimentally and extremely well written. What I loved about it as well is that there are like little illustrations throughout, and I just found this to be extremely experimental and extremely fun. I love when a book is fun. I love when a book is trying something new. And I love when not only am I learning something new, but I'm also just reading something that I otherwise wouldn't have read or heard of. This is also published by Akoya Publishing, and this was the first title of theirs that I read. So they are a brand new independent publisher. It'd be really cool to see them longlisted for the International Book Prize as well. Next up, we've got Capitalists Must Starve by Park Seo-yeon, translated from Korean by Anton He. Anton He was actually one of the judges for the International Book Prize last year, so I think it would be really cool to see him as a longlisted translator this year. Started this last night, and I'm not that much through it, but I've been enjoying it so much that I just decided that this just had to come out onto the long list. This is a novel, so it says, set against the backdrop of Japanese-occupied Korea, Capitalists Must Starve follows a sharp-tongued, big-hearted heroine who dares to love, rebel, and carve out space for working-class women in a world that tries to silence them. It also says that it's reminiscent of Alias Grace and Pachinko. It's a feminist historical fiction with grit, grace, and a streak of dark humor. It's a stirring portrait of resistance from below, fierce, funny, and full of fight. So far from what I've read, this is extremely funny, bold, and it's introducing me to an aspect of history that I really don't know much about, and that is something that I love. I love learning about new cultures and new languages. You might think that I'm crazy because I'm putting something onto my predictions list that I have not finished yet, but I'm telling you now, I have no doubt that this is an excellent story, and also Anton is a brilliant translator, so I have full faith that this is a book that everyone should absolutely read. I will also say this is published by Tilted Axis Press, who won for their publication of Tomb of Sand. I love the publisher, I love what they do, I love what they stand for, and I also love Anton as a translator. So even though I have not finished this book yet, I have full faith that it should be a contender and it should be on the predictions list for the International Booker Prize. Next up, we've got Restoration by Ave Barrera, translated by Ellen Jones and Robin Myers. So this is published by Charco Press, who are one of my favorite publishers. They exclusively publish Latin American literature in the UK. While I have not read this yet, my friends have highly recommended it, and it is up next on my reading list. So this is a contemporary ghost story about photography, feminism, bad men, and old houses. Jasmina has been hired by her maybe boyfriend to restore his family home, a grubby abandoned time capsule where a great artist once lived. As she moves from room to room, scrubbing, scraping, plastering over cracks, the histories inhabiting them awaken, and the lives of the women who came before her begin to overlap with her own. Who is the woman in the photograph? And what secrets linger in that last locked room? Propelled by female desire, shaped by the violence of the male gaze, and inspired by the endless vitality of old stories remade anew, Restoration takes on Bluebeard, Salvador Elizondo, Juan Rolfo, Angela Carter, Mariana Enriquez, and Amparo Davila to produce a novel of obsession, reclamation, and romance gone very, very wrong. Restoration is a ghost story with porous borders between Jasmina and these forgotten women, between the novel and us. The questions it asks might also be about what's behind our own barred doors. So this sounds absolutely incredible. If you know me, you know I love Mariana Enriquez, I love a ghost story, and I love Latin American literature. So this ticks all of those boxes. While I have not read this myself yet, I do know that everything that Charco publishes is of an excellent quality. The reason why I've also picked it is because it's got this element of fiction meets reality again, like the other books that I've mentioned, we've got this element of bringing life and memory to these forgotten voices throughout history. So I think that this is a really strong contender. Next up, we've got Taiwan Travelogue by Yang Xuanxi, translated by Lin King. So this is published by And Other Stories, who are one of my favorite publishers ever, and they are also the winning publishers from last year as they published Heartlamp by Banning Mushtaq. The reason why I've chosen this one is because while I'm yet to get a copy and I'm yet to read it, I do think that it sounds absolutely excellent. And it fits the same criteria of everything that I've mentioned before. Taiwan Travelogue is a metafictional lesbian romance between a writer and an interpreter, and it's styled as a rediscovered colonial era novel in translation. What's really cool and experimental about this is that the novel is actually structured as a translation. So if you've read Jennifer Croft's Disappearance of Irina Ray, I really do think that it's going to be something similar, where you've got playful footnotes that are part of the core prose, but it's structured in a way to make you think that it's a translated text, but really it's telling a story. So the novel is structured as a translation of a rediscovered text by a Japanese writer. And so Taiwan Travelogue is a bittersweet story of a love story between two women, nested in artful exploration of language, history, and power. Set in May of 1938, the young novelist Aoyama Chizuko sails from Japan to Taiwan, where her interpreter helps her experience real island life, and she gets to taste a lot of authentic Taiwanese food, and obviously a romance ensues. That is all I know. Even if it's not longlisted, this is absolutely a book that I really, really do want to read. I'm looking forward to learning more about this aspect of history, and I love a queer love story, so I'm really excited to delve into this too. The next book on my predictions list is The Disappearing Act by Maria Stepanova, translated by Sasha Dugale and published by Fitzcarraldo. I've not read this one yet, but I have seen a lot of really great commentary about it online. I've seen a lot of anticipation, and it's made me really anxious to get my hands on a copy. It sounds absolutely fantastic, and it also meets the criteria of all of the other books on my predictions list. This novel is about a writer known as M, who is living in exile while her home country wages war on a neighboring state. Racked by shame and severed from her language, M finds herself unable to write, unmoored in a present where her future feels unknowable. When she travels to a nearby country for an event, a twist of fate leaves her stranded in an unfamiliar city, phoneless and untraceable. In this rupture, she feels a flicker of liberation, the possibility of starting over, but the memories of childhood, books, films, and tarot cards pull her back, the last fragments of a vanishing world. Then she meets a troupe of circus performers who invite her to join them. For a moment, reinvention seems within reach. Oscillating between reality and dream, written in a rich hypnotic prose, The Disappearing Act is a haunting meditation on identity, language, and the fragile desire to disappear by Maria Stepanova, one of Russia's greatest living writers. This sounds absolutely perfect. It sounds right up my alley. I think that it's very similar to my other predictions in terms of experimental prose, the sort of synthesis between reality and dream. It's very similar to What Remains by Bryce Lamela. And so I do genuinely think that this is a very, very, very strong contender. I'd be really surprised if Fitzcarraldo don't make it on this year's longlist, just based on past performance, because they are such a powerful independent publisher. Even if it doesn't get longlisted, it's still one that I want to get my hands on because it sounds great and all my friends are reading and reviewing it. So next up on my predictions list is Tarantula by Eduardo Halfon, translated from Guatemalan Spanish by Daniel Hahn. So this is a book that I only heard about recently. Thank you to my friend Stephen for putting it on my radar. This sounds like an extraordinary book, and it sounds exactly like my kind of read. Even if it doesn't make it to the overall long list, I'm still very confident in that it's a book that everybody should read. The book is set in 1984 when 12-year-old Eduardo is sent to the mountains for what his parents describe as a Jewish summer camp. What it turns out to be is an immersive reenactment of a Nazi concentration camp. Decades later, on the other side of the world, Eduardo sits across from a table from a stranger. This stranger is Samuel Blum, the Jewish camp counselor who transformed into a terrifying Nazi commandant all those years ago. Now he is an old man and he is ready to talk. Tarantula is a novel about individual and collective inheritance, individual and collective violence. It's about memory, trauma, connection, and estrangement. It asks what it means to be a Jew living in the long aftermath of the 20th century and how the past lives on in the present. A lot of the books that I've picked seem to have this overlap between memory and reality, and this sounds very similar to the same things that the author of What Remains, or She Who Remains, or Bloody Awful in Different Ways are trying to accomplish, right? I guess it's also very politically relevant, and I guess it's asking a lot of questions about legacy, and that is one of the most important things that we can all explore collectively. While I'm yet to read it, and I'm very excited to read it, I do think that is a strong contender. Lastly, my final pick for this year's International Booker Prize predictions list is none other than Gitanjali Shree's The Roof Beneath Their Feet, translated by Rabul Soni. So, The Roof Beneath Their Feet is a playful and moving masterpiece of psychological intrigue and feminist space making. Gitanjali Shree won the International Booker Prize in 2022, and so I'm very hopeful that this text will also get longlisted just so we can encounter more Indian literature. While I'm yet to read this, this has been described as an Indian modern classic by the International Booker Prize winning author, where roofs are meant for wild things, for romance and for play. They are the realms of freedom, freedom from the male gaze, sexual freedom, and freedom from society. Kachako and Lalna use their roofs to build a friendship that transcends time and memory. This book is one that is extremely experimental, it's fun, it's fairly short, but I feel like sometimes short books are the ones that can explore the bigger questions, right? Because they don't have to sit and give you answers. They can just pose the question and leave. It says here that the writing is extremely lyrical, where Shree moves fluidly between time frames, mirroring memory to build tension, while the rhythmic prose in Soni's translation draws attention to the characters' interior lives. The compassion at the heart of the novel is deeply satisfying. Again, I think that this will be an excellent read, and it's got this similar aspect of looking at memory, looking at reality, and while this one might not be drawing on fact, just fiction, I think that this will make for a really interesting read, and I would love to see previous winner also be longlisted for this year's International Booker Prize. So this concludes today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I don't have any high hopes that I'm going to get all of these right, but like I said, it has just been a lot of fun getting to do this entire process and then put together my predictions list. I have thoroughly enjoyed this process, and so that is all of the validation that I need. The International Booker Prize longlist is announced next week, and I would love to know what your thoughts are. I would love to know whether we share any overlapping predictions, whether these are some new texts that you've never heard of before, or whether you have some other contenders that you think are more likely to be longlisted. I would love to hear what you think, so please feel free to start a conversation with me in the comments. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next week when the longlist is announced.